Welcome to the Folk Hogan Podcast. We are a show about Folk Hogan, the band. We've got interviews with the band. We've got previews of live songs. We've got stories from the road. We've got early previews of the album that we're working on. What will it be called? I don't know.
We haven't decided yet.
Something.
You'd think we would have figured that out by now.
Yeah. How are you two? We got Casey and Moses. Moses, how are you?
I'm so good.
Groovy, baby.
Today's pretty great. How about you, Chips?
We'll get back to me. How are you, Casey?
Yeah, doing real well. Real well.
We usually batch these together and record a few.
Yeah.
I think by now people have started to catch on that I either wear the same thing all the time, which is not far from the truth. I'm a little bit of a...
Yeah, same. To be fair, I'm pretty much always in a hoodie and a vest, so...
I'm a little bit of a Batman character in that way.
Me too. It's always something black or really dark gray.
Yep.
Yeah.
Something metal.
Yes.
I recently got a Top Ramen t-shirt.
Ooh.
That's like it's just got the Top Ramen logo on it.
Hell yeah.
Is it a faded design?
And it's on that like light tan. It's on like a light tan. Man.
The right color for that.
Just almost immediately stained every time I wear it.
Of course.
Coffee,
yeah.
vape juice. Just there's
your dog.
There's just a slew of fluids spraying at me all the time.
I mean, better than none, I guess, depending on the fluids.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
there hasn't been enough fluids spraying at me recently because my girlfriend has been gone for like a month. But now she's back, and she got bit.
Time to get the bib out. Then.
She got bit by a bunch of ants that lived in her. You could call
maternal ants or paternal ants.
You could call it maternal, paternal. I don't know.
Her mom's sisters or her dad's sisters.
Oh,
that bought her.
Oh yeah.
Her.
These were ants in Bali. So, but the thing about Bali is that everybody's related out there.
Interesting.
And she was recanting a lot of stories about people going on a date and then realizing like, hey, you're my, that's your grandfather? That's my grandfather.
Yeah.
And one person turning the other and being like, yeah, but it's Bali.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. And I'm like, well, that's a big deal to me.
Yeah. In Iceland, they have their own Icelandic dating app that is also a genealogy app so that you can make sure you're not dating someone you're too closely related to.
Ooh, that's smart.
Yeah. It's a good plan.
But, she got bit by a bunch of ants. She got bit by a bunch of mosquitoes and then she was eating a lot of fresh fruit. And so she's got like a little eczema on her chin. And she's just like, and I got the flu. I'm going to die. It's definitely some mosquito-borne disease that everybody coming from the UK
Trench
was
foot.
vaccinated for, but I wasn't because I was coming from the US.
Right. Yeah. Go figure.
I don't know. So that and the 40 hours of travel on the way back, she's been feeling pretty sick.
Ugh.
So she's been spraying the wrong kind of fluids.
Yeah. Well,
really
fair.
what I was getting at.
Fair. That does not sound particularly enjoyable.
Yeah. But, that's... I'm just grumpy today.
That's okay.
That's...
You don't got to be chipper old chips every day.
I like that chipper old chips.
Yeah.
I've been working on the new album art, which is
beautiful so far.
Which is a real difficulty if we don't have a title.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet.
Because, album art is basically picture the band name and a title. Yeah. And, well, we know the band.
That's
name.
rad. I really like
Yeah.
that.
I'm showing Casey some examples.
Oh, you guys are looking
No
at
one
it.
gets to see it.
Ooh,
Yeah.
early
I like this one a
preview.
lot.
I like the style. Like,
Yeah.
it's
I love that.
different than you guys normally do.
I love what you put around that, Chips. It looks so cool. Good job.
Yeah, dude.
For those of you who don't know, the majority of our graphic design stuff that we've had over the years, I'd say almost
Child labor.
entirely
Child labor, almost all child labor.
has been child labor, and the child is Chips.
We're one of the few bands that are pro child labor. We're bringing
No.
it back. We're bringing it back to the 80s.
That's only because we're all, though we are
we recently
becoming
got by,
elevated in age, we are still basically children.
Yeah.
So
We recently got bought by the CEO of 1980s Nike,
yeah,
his parent company.
yep. We have children sew our albums,
Yeah, one at a time.
not to make light of
Put them to work.
the destruction of humankind. Someone
there's-
asked me today if we would ever talk politics on the podcast, and I was like, I'm pretty sure my bandmates would stop me from because they've seen me get very animated. So
Maybe not this bandmate.
It's
That can be a different
it's been a
podcast.
really it's been a really interesting thing. It's because you could literally be Rage Against the Machine and be raging against the machine for 20 years, and there's still somebody that's going to be like, why did this band have to get so political?
yeah, yep, yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like just listening to the music, it's pretty easy to get a feel for where we're at.
Yeah, it was Paul Ryan's favorite band was Rage Against the Machine. And when he came out and said that, Rage Against the Machine was like, buddy, you are the machine we are raging against.
You don't get it.
Yeah, you should go away forever. And he kind of did, but not enough. Yeah, let's talk band stuff before I launch into politics, because that's something everyone's real tired of talking about and hearing about right now. That's for sure. I know I am.
We're just gonna write songs for the next 4 years.
Yep. Yeah, as we have always done. So we're just gonna have a general old chat about a bunch of little topics that Nick came up with. So Nick, I want to get your opinion on this. Here's a question for you. How do you feel that the sound of this band has evolved since its inception?
The perception of how the sounds evolved was a huge thing from the first and second album.
Mm-hmm.
But to us, we were writing those concurrently.
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to get we just took a bunch of songs that fit well together, and we wrote a bunch of songs that fit well together and put them on two separate albums.
Yeah.
And for those several years, while we were out promoting that and playing shows and touring and doing all the things that we do, people were like, whoa, your sound has just totally changed. Well, to us, it was like, no, those are just two different albums we wrote at the same time.
Yeah.
There wasn't like a huge jump. Like, in fact, we recorded them at the same studio.
Yeah.
We kept generally a lot of the same members.
Everyone except banjo. Yeah.
And so that there was always like this weird
drums.
disagreement between what we had in our hearts and minds and the feedback we were hearing. But really, when we went in to the studio in 2017 sometime to start on Behold, we had like a very intentional production meeting where we reviewed samples and we talked about what worked and what didn't work with the first two albums, and where we felt the gaps were between the live shows and the sound of the band even playing those songs on the first two albums, and as well as where we were headed. And, you know, at the time, our engineer, Steve, was like, you've got to get like a better locked in drum and bass sound.
Yeah.
There needs to be this driving
For sure.
feeling behind the production. And there's got to be, you know, there's got to be some changes with some of the voicings of chords and things like that. So even as we were tracking stuff, it was like, yeah, I like what you're playing, but can you play it in the middle of the guitar neck? Because that's really like conflicting with where the banjo is, like frequency wise.
Yeah.
So he did a lot of he gave us a lot of pointers about putting things sonically in the right place, but also recording it in a way that would allow for that to translate and be heard.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's one of the difficulties of the first two albums is just that they're kind of messy sounding. And, you know, that's partly on us because we mixed the second album, but you know, that's just how it be. So, you know, I try to think of this new album as like the show is to Band of Mighty Souls what this new album is to Behold.
Yeah.
Like we had Band of Mighty Souls and it all had this very distinct feel to it. And then the show had this like very different feel, but very like, it felt a bit more artistic. It felt a bit more expansive.
Yeah.
And then I feel the same thing about
better
Behold.
at our instruments. The chord progression got a lot more complex. But there was also, you know, it being like a thematic album.
Yeah.
A lot of that album is the same chords and keys rearranged.
Yeah.
Not
very
unlike,
similar to this.
Not
new
unlike
album.
a movie score. If you think about how you're watching a movie and the theme comes in and then it comes in later in a different movement and then
leitmotif. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the writing. That was like an intentional thing that we did with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Canyon used to always like saying that Band of Mighty Souls was us starting on our instruments. The show was us getting comfortable on our instruments, and Behold was us getting proficient at our instruments. So yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. I definitely feel that the comparison between the first two albums with, you know, Behold and the new album, I feel like there's some parallels there. Not just in the fact that stylistically they're similar in those comparisons, but also that the newest album functions on somewhat of a concept the way that the second album did.
Yeah, I kind of drifted off and never really got to the new stuff, but really,
but it's evolved a lot.
The giant cliff right now is no accordion.
Yeah, big difference.
So we've gotten away from having an accordion player because Canyon left the band, and we really decided at the time to not replace accordion.
Yeah,
and so it's opened up a lot of space, and it's caused us to have to rework parts. And we have one less singer in the band. So we've had to draw straws and decide which songs to keep and which songs to shelf for now.
Yeah. Which has been tough because like there's been times where we were, when Canyon left the band, we went through our list of songs and like what we're keeping and what we're dropping. And some things we dropped because it was like, well, Canyon sings that, and like, we didn't really have an interest in keeping that song around. Like sometimes that was the case. But then there were other songs that was like, specifically Larry the Legend. It was like, you know what? it would I wouldn't feel right about singing that song with, you know, it's a song that Canyon wrote about his dad, and I don't know how right I would feel about performing that, you know, and taking his words. And so we decided not to play that song. And then when we got to Europe this last tour, Tom, one of our most favorite fans in the entire world, was like, I was like, hey, you can pick our next song. What do you want to hear? And he was like, Larry the Legend. And we had this moment of like looking at each other on stage, just going, oh no, we haven't practiced this song in quite some time. I'm like, I don't even know if I know all the words. And like, but it's what Tom wants. So we went for it.
Do it.
And like in a situation like that, it felt okay, but I don't think I would feel comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, so
it went from being a song that we played at literally every show from the time that we wrote it on to we just don't really play it anymore. Yeah. It's not on the set list.
And you know, that happened organically with a number of other songs. You know, we really stopped playing, for example, Long Walk Home. We stopped playing that song probably 2016.
Yeah.
And just like,
because everybody was wimpy.
Yeah. That song's hard.
It's hard.
It's very hard.
It's hard to play the chords.
No, it's hard to sing that song.
Okay, that's fair.
That's a brutal one.
But, you know, what's the banjo excuse? Cameron.
He just doesn't want to play in D. So, you know what we did? We wrote a whole new album, and the whole thing is in D. Take that, Cameron. That's what you get.
Take that.
Well,
yeah.
He might just have to bring one of his other 32 banjos to a show and tune it.
Have one in the right key. Yeah.
They just started making these little stomp boxes that have a tuner right on them. You can just...
never heard of it.
It's best pedal. Best pedal around.
Never heard of it.
Favorite pedal.
Casey, you got a question you want to ask?
Yeah. So I'm super stoked to hear this new album. Or I've heard it, but super stoked for other people to hear it. But my question would be like, what influences or events kind of shaped or like the direction of this new album for you guys?
I mean, it started as like, we've talked about this in some of the earlier episodes of the podcast. Like the idea for this new album started as an album about getting older and aging and just
that's real.
And you know, and it sort of grew out of that. So we just started to take a lot of things from our lives, specifically me. I wrote a lot of songs on this album about things that have happened in my life, which I've not done for Folk Hogan in the past, with the exception of a one or two here and there. You know, my voice getting blown up in 2018 is why the song Like Icarus exists. It's a song about blowing my voice up. You know, I Was Alive in 2005 is about, you know, being a young person who likes to play songs and party with, you know, big dreams in their head, thinking that they're different than everyone around them, only to get older and learn that now you're the ghost that haunts other people.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we really started the answer with that exact question in mind.
Yeah.
We said, we want to do another album. We want it to have an overarching theme. And we want it to go together. But we don't want to be locked into too tight of a theme.
Yeah.
And then it became, like Moses said, something very personal and very woven into all of us, because we all sat down in Spring City, Utah, which there's going to be a picture of the Spring City Inn.
Yeah.
And
that's what
I forgot what it was called for a second.
Yeah.
And it's likely going to be the cover art because we just sat around and wrote songs for 2 to 3 weeks.
2 weeks, yeah.
All of us. So everyone that was down there had a part in writing those songs.
Yeah,
The way that we function as a band, we talk about being like very much like anybody can bring an idea and everybody's going to change it. And, once you've put it out into the band room, like it's going to change and you have to be really comfy with that. That's a very, very opposite way of how most bands that have been able to stay successful for this long function.
Yeah.
Every other band is essentially a solo project with one person that's like doing 95% of the work.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the band, we had all been that person before, and it was like, and knew how much it sucked to just be the person that books the shows, tells everybody where to be, checks on everybody, writes all the songs, teaches people their parts because you had to write them for them, etc. I mean, I've been in bands where, the other members didn't know how to play their instruments upon joining.
Yeah.
And so,
Cameron.
And so like we really came into this with the experience of all of us had played shows in different groups and been the leader of those groups. And so we were willing to kind of risk it and put it all into this bucket together.
I can definitely relate. 'Cause, I mean, to an extent, it's kind of the dynamic of my current band, Lamanites. I mean, the boys always collaborate with me, and we'll work together to kind of polish off a song. But for the most part, as far as like coming up with the basic idea and bringing that to the band, I do most of that work.
Yeah, and I mean,
and it's always been my baby, so I don't mind doing it. But
that's kind of how we function to an extent. Like, I'll usually write something, bring it to the band, and then, like, we had to have the conversation many years ago with each other of like, this is just how this is going to happen. When you bring a song to the band, just expect that we're going to chop it into a bunch of pieces, and we're going to throw a bunch of pieces away and make new pieces, and then stitch everything back together and go like, okay, this is what we got.
Yeah.
And like, that's a hard thing for a lot of people because, you
have to have zero
into
ego, or at least, keep it in check.
Yeah.
In order to be able to work with people like that.
Yeah.
'Cause you can't just be stuck in like, okay, my ideas are the best and I don't like anybody's ideas. That there's no point in having that attitude at all if you're going to be writing with friends.
Nobody wants to be in Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, no.
Because of Axl Rose.
Unless they're getting paid a lot of money.
Right. Even still.
And, we've grounded ourselves to a lot of these like pillars of how this is going to function. Because that's the writing process here.
Yeah.
But it also makes a lot of other decisions. Like, that's the reason that Folk Hogan doesn't play covers. That's the reason that, for the most part, we don't jam. We're not.
Yeah.
Everyone in this band is highly skilled at their instruments and could go sit in at a jam with their instrument of about any genre. But as a band, we don't go like, hey, I got a new riff. Let's work this out. And then we sit there for hours doing that because we've taken all of that time and energy over the years and put it into that discovery process of putting the work in up front and then using that time to say, okay, does this need another section? What would it be like if we cut this verse?
Yeah.
What if we actually took that riff and made that the intro and then brought it back?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's really important to talk about like how it is that everyone contributes, like how that actually functions. Like a lot of times I'll basically bring a skeleton of a song to the band. Like, here's all the general chords. Here's the changes I have. Here's the lyrics I have, which no one cares about because like we're not focused on that right off the bat.
You got the bare bones.
Yeah. And it's like, maybe there's a riff here, maybe there's a bridge here or not. And then, once everyone sits down and starts learning it, the way a lot of it works is the first time that Nick showed up to play guitar with us, I explained it to him as like, hey, because we're going to have accordion, banjo, and mandolin, what we need guitar to do is probably not like you've done before. Like we need guitar to do in this band what bass does in a lot of bands. We need guitar to like be the big foundation for these three melody instruments to sit on top of.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because I just strummed the mandolin. But like, so like Nick basically provides this like steady ground for us all to operate on. It's like it is the foundation on which the rest of us are able to build everything. And I feel like it's probably easy for some people to not understand what that dynamic is like, to be able to have the guitar filling in all of the cracks.
Yeah.
But like that is a huge component of our sound, is like having the guitar doing all of the just like the heavy lifting. It's filling in all the cracks. It's doing the rhythmic and like melodic things that we need it to do for everything else to be able to function. And so while someone from the outside might look at Folk Hogan and think like, oh yeah, they're a band that has banjo and mandolin. The reality is like the guitar is kind of like the center of the hub for all of us to understand where to work from.
Yeah.
And then,
It's a point of reference.
Cameron will always come up with some super cool banjo part that will end up being like, okay, who's going to drop out so we can hear that? Or, does everything drop out for him to play that for like 2 bars and then everything comes back in? Or like, how do we work that in? He's always going to come up with a super cool part because he's really good at the banjo. Sebastian, man, oh Lord. Sebastian plays drums, and this is not a slight on any drummer we've had in the past, but Sebastian plays the drums a lot of the time the way that I always hoped a drummer would play the songs in this band. He absolutely just drives the songs. He keeps us at tempo, and he just keeps this sort of aggressive and like perpetual motion to every song. Yep. That just absolutely keeps us at a high energy. It keeps us rolling, keeps us rocking. And there's been so many times where he's just like, Sebastian comes from the metal world. And so there's been so many times where he's like, we're playing the song for the 500th time. And so he just throws in some ridiculous fill. And then the rest of us are like, oh, you should do that. And then suddenly now we're all trying to like accent him doing that fill.
Yeah. And I think that kind of gets into the next part of this, which is, where's the line between experimenting with new sounds and what we've kind of decided is like too far?
That's a good question. There's been a fair number of songs that like have come to the band that have ended up getting cut that were maybe just like too far of a step outside. Initially, The Fall was a song that just like fell flat, didn't work, and so we shelved it, There's that Come Over. That's a great example of a song that like it's easy, it's catchy, it's sappy, cheesy love song. And like when we needed to fill time, it was a song you could pull out and we didn't have to have rehearsed it because it's that simple. And so it's like you could just play through the song and it was fine. But like there are songs in the past that I've brought to the band. Like when I brought Take Me to Your Leader to the band, I fully expected the band to be like, no, because it's weird. It's different and it's all riff heavy. But like it's difficult to know how the band is going to be able to take something and transform it into something else. It's difficult to know how we're all going to be able to work together to create that different thing. And because of that, I feel a little bit more liberty of like, I can bring something to the band and not, if it's not going to work, that's fine. It can get cut. And there's been a few songs that we've just cut because it's just like, yeah, this is like too outside the box. And I don't feel like there's ever a sentiment of like, it's too weird, we're not willing to try it. I feel like there's always a sentiment of like, well, that's pretty different, but let's give it a shot. Because like I said last episode, Bourbon Blues, like I didn't expect that song to get picked up by us. But like, there's plenty of other songs that like we tried and it just fell, and the reasons that they didn't work are kind of amorphous. It's kind of this just like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't work, so we're not going to do it. It's a weird feeling when it happens, but.
So it's like cool if I show up with like a bunch of chorus pedals,
Cameron will die.
drum machines,
Cameron will die.
vocoders.
No, it's a good question though, because everyone in this band is a multi-instrumentalist, and like there's a lot of options of different things we can try. And I think that line, since you were asking, I think that line so far for us has been the studio. Like when we're in the studio, let's just go for it. I mean, for when we recorded the show, we got timpanis and a marimba and like a bunch of like orchestral instruments and like threw them into the mix.
I mean, the fall has a really, for lack of a better word come to mind, it has a little bit of a Latino like.
Yeah, it's a Latin beat. Yeah,
beat.
for sure.
Like,
and that was all Seb.
yeah, and that was the first time I'd ever really like heard that type of flair with you guys' stuff.
Yeah.
That's the other thing, like going back to Seb, like I've come to Seb with like songs that I was like, he's gonna hate this.
Yeah.
Just because, I don't know, just jamming with him alone like made me want to be like push myself to be better. But then I would come to him with like a song that I was like, he's gonna hate this, and he would start playing something to it and make me like it more than I actually like.
Yeah.
Okay, with that, that's great, man.
Yeah,
Let's roll with it.
I jammed here once with him where I was playing guitar, just like I felt the need. I was like, oh, I need to play guitar. And he was like, oh, I'd love to jam. And he showed up and beforehand he was like, well, what kind of stuff do you want to play? And I was like, yeah, it's mostly like punk stuff, like just some of my old songs. It'd be fun to like play them again. And then showed up, and then I just had this idea in my head, and I was like, oh, let's see if I can work this out. And I just started playing it, and we messed with it for a little bit, and then Seb was like, I didn't expect to play blast beats today. And I was like, I didn't expect you to play blast beats today, but it worked. And that's like the dynamic of how it is. Like, you know, there are times where people try to experiment with stuff in the band where it's like, yeah, that works, or yeah, it doesn't work. And, you know, I think that Cameron probably has the most ideas that he throws out. And a lot of times it's while we're in the early stages of a song, he's going like, oh, well, what if we made this chord? What if we did this inversion of it? Or what if we turn this into a seventh? Or what if we do this or this or this? I feel like he throws out probably the most crazy ideas. You know, Scott always had a lot of good ideas. Canyon always had a ton of good ideas. Jared, our original bass player, always had a ridiculous amount of good ideas. So like, you know, but for every every idea that everyone has that functions, there's 2 or 3 that everyone's like, nah, doesn't work.
Moses is going to get a Healy talk box for his mandolin.
Hell yeah.
We're going to Frampton it up.
It'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, having like that very, very like Latin beat and bass line and everything, it's like it's totally out of left field. But it's also like if you stop and like look around Utah, I mean, like Mexico is such a big influence on our daily
This used to be Mexico.
goings. Yeah. It did.
Yeah.
And so like the things that I get homesick for is not like Mormon casserole when we leave the country.
It's Beto's breakfast burritos.
All day.
Yep.
All day.
Yep.
It's all of these things that are heavily influenced by being so close to Mexico, being formerly Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a great deal over the years about, at least on albums, throwing in trumpets.
Yeah.
And, you know, very much in that sort of, if anyone listening's ever listened to Calexico, they've made some really good, or Mariachi El Bronx, or you know, a group like
that's
that.
what
like,
I was trying to think of the name of that because
and like, you know, that's just
definitely
part
like
of what we're used to hearing.
one of our influences.
Yeah.
And you know, even all the shows that we've done with Metalachi.
Yeah. Oh man, they're so much fun.
Have you experienced Metalachi?
I think I have, yeah.
Yeah, they're like a metal cover band that's all mariachi instruments.
Yeah.
I love them so much, and I love every time we've played a show with them. But like, I cannot think about that band without remembering how many times they have been like, "Hey, come out and sing the last song with us," and I've gone out on stage with them. And I think we've played with them 5 times, something like that. And I think every time but one, I have knocked someone over on stage accidentally. The worst time was their original singer. I think they ended the show with Crazy Train. And both Canyon and I went up front and like had our arms around the singer. And when he sang the last note, he like leaned back. And Canyon and I both were off balance, and both of us went to step back, and both of us stepped into a monitor. And so all 3 of us just went flat on our backs on stage. And Canyon and I had beers in our hands. So it was just like, ah.
That makes me think of playing with the Young Dubliners at Commonwealth. And they're like, you gotta get on stage with us.
Yeah, they always invite us out to do Rocky
And-
Road Rocky Road from Dublin,
which is so cool. It's you know, but they did this, and then you know there was this whole thing early in the day before the show because they needed like a backline. They needed amps.
Yeah.
To be provided, and they weren't there, and so there was like a scramble to get amps. And we had like met one of their local fans that had provided all of these amps and stuff. And there was like a Marshall half stack or like at least a cab on stage.
No, it was a half stack.
And
I'll never forget it.
and Curtis comes walking out and just knocks the whole thing over.
Right on its face.
Right
right on top of the microphone. Just right on its face. And so we turned around and we picked it up and like put the mic back in place as fast as we could. But still, it was just like,
And he was so embarrassed.
he was, but bless his heart. Like he came out, he was so excited. What happened was, I think he was walking over to the drummer to like rock out with the drummer, and he stopped to like jump up and down and like pump his fist. And this is one of the reasons why they don't allow random people to just walk on a stage. There's cables everywhere. There's boxes everywhere. There's all this stuff everywhere that you may not see as being part of the crowd that is a danger. It's easy to trip. It's easy to to step on something you shouldn't. And I think that if I remember correctly, what happened was when he did that, he was like looking out at the crowd and stepped on something that made him lose his balance. And he like went onto the amp, and the amp, it's a half stack. So they're top heavy, and it just went straight over. And he was mortified, but I turned around, me and Curtis picked it up in like half a second, got it back in place. But I was laughing.
Before anyone noticed.
Yeah, I was laughing. And when I turned back around, the singer for Young Dubliners was busting a gut. Like red in the face, he was laughing so hard.
He's the coolest guy ever.
The whole band, they're just a bunch of wonderful people. Love him to death.
He's just sweet old grandpa Irish rock.
Yeah, we played with them in Diamonds in Jerome, and as we get into telling tour stories, you're going to hear a lot of stories about Diamonds. We opened for them at Diamonds in Jerome, and before the show, the green room there was basically like a living room and a kitchen that was built onto the back of the bar, and had a foosball table, and they had a TV in there and a stereo, and the stereo was connected to the mains, and the TV had cameras, so you could watch the opening bands from the green room. It was awesome.
Rad. That's way rad.
Greg Dodson set that place up, did an amazing job. Loved that bar.
Nice.
And
5 or 6 cameras.
yeah, full production. They did a phenomenal
they had
job.
a really healthy YouTube channel, and they'd give the footage to the bands, and then they'd put it out there, and that would help promote the place and help promote the bands.
And we did this show, and before the show, and this is common, it might seem to people who don't know the way that being on tour works, but like touring bands tend to stay in their green room before the show. They tend to not interact with people because like they're on tour, they're tired, they don't want to wear themselves out too much. They got to get all the rest they can. So they're back in the green room. We couldn't go back there. We do our set, they come out, they play their set, the show's over, and then we all go into the green room together. And it's a typical post-show Folk Hogan green room, meaning that, and at Diamonds, where Greg would just be like, any booze you want, any beer you want, you want Jello shots, like whatever you want,
Idaho
we
is
got
a
it.
lawless wonderland compared to Utah.
And Greg was just so wonderful to us, and so it turns into this like raucous party pretty quickly. And I sit down on a couch, and I'm just like watching things unfold as their band is like slowly coming in, and it's getting louder and louder, and everyone's getting rowdier and rowdier. And Sean, the singer for Young Dubliners, comes in and looks around at everyone, and then looks over at me and comes and sits down next to me. And we proceed to just have a conversation about his entire career and the things that he has learned. And he was incredibly gracious, incredibly generous, a wonderful person to just hang out with and talk to all night long. And it just warmed my heart, the cockles of my heart.
It's just like everything that you would hope and wish and experience playing with a band that's on that level.
Yeah.
They are that.
Yeah.
And every other band is not. No, we get lucky. We get really lucky. We get to play with a lot of really awesome bands.
For sure.
But literally, there's going to be a point of the night where he takes the time to talk to every band member and gives them a little bit of advice about their music career because he's the person that you want to listen to about that.
And he's been doing it for 30 plus years, How often do you get to talk to someone that has that level of experience?
Better listen up.
And, they came up during a time where this was a business of relationships. I mean, now being in a band is like a very, very much a product of our culture. And it's more akin to like being on Tinder versus like going out and meeting someone in the real world.
Also, full disclosure, that Young Dubliners show that we played at the Depot. I'm about to tell a secret here. Unless
Oh, looks like we're out of time.
I was gonna say,
Dang it.
Ruh-roh.
did Scott talk about this on his episode?
Yeah.
He did. Okay, all right. Yeah, we drank
We
their
ran
whiskey.
out of whiskey and we drank their whiskey.
We drank their. we ran out of whiskey. We took their whiskey bottle and refilled our
Allegedly.
whiskey bottle. And then when they got back to the green room, they were like, "Boys, we did it. We drank a whole bottle of whiskey."
They were so proud.
Nah, you didn't.
Nah, you didn't.
That show at Commonwealth.
The next time we play with them, we should show up with like a whiskey
An
bottle.
extra-
Be like,
extra bottle of Jameson. That show at
Commonwealth.
Commonwealth, when they gave us our green room, there were 2 green rooms there, and we drank all the beers in the green room and all the beers that we brought and the whiskey that we brought. And then we played the show, and at the end of the night, they were like, "Come on in, have all the beers you want," in their green room. And I just remember walking in and being like, "You guys got things better than Bud Light?" Like, I'm so jealous. This is what it gets you being in the career for that long.
Yeah, one of the times we played with them, they came to our room. They're like, "We don't have any ice. Can we have your ice?" And they looked around. They're like, "Where's all your stuff?"
Yeah.
And they were like so bummed out.
Yeah.
And they're like, "You could come over and have a beer with us.
Real sweethearts.
Like
Yeah.
we have like all this stuff that we don't need."
Yeah.
They're just like immediately like, just like pull a chair up to the table kind of
so
mentality.
Wonderful, wonderful human
Well,
beings, every one of them.
We're going to do something kind of rare, which is we're going to go out on a song that isn't a Folk Hogan song.
Ooh,
And it's not a Young Dubliner
You got
song.
licensing
Good
for that?
guess. It's The Longest Johns.
Hey, we did a show with them.
And what was the crowd like? Please tell people
I am
about
so
how this was
happy
the
that-
weirdest crowd that we've
Okay.
ever played for.
So
Like the day after we got home from a Europe tour.
the
or some shit,
explanation
too.
for this, I really want especially old school Folk Hogan fans to hear this, because the early days of Folk Hogan was some real heavy drinking, some real crazy shows. So we get booked for this show with the Longest Johns at the name of the venue is Soundwell.
Soundwell.
And Longest Johns are like flying in to their shows, mostly renting gear, and doing their whole set. Now they had gained they've released a lot of music. They've done a lot of like sea shanty stuff. A lot of people know them for that.
Yeah, they went viral for the sea shanty.
Yeah, they went really viral for doing the Wellerman. And
Okay.
we got asked to open for them. We show up and, we're ready to do our thing. And the crowd filters in. And the crowd, I felt like basically I was at a stake or ward church party. It was like, oh, we're not playing to the right crowd right now.
Was
They
there
still
punch
loved
from
us.
Concentrate?
So many BYU
Dude,
shirts.
It was, yes, a lot of BYU shirts. There was, I just remember,
Refreshments?
I remember
And it
I
was
made,
all ages.
it was all ages. I made
which
a
is the
joke at
first
one
time we
point.
played there where it had been all ages.
I said, go over to our merch booth and buy something, because if you don't, I'm going to tell your bishop about it and you're going to have to talk to him on Sunday. And the mixture of the faces that I saw from that joke was incredible. All of the middle-aged older men scowled at me. And all the like younger kids like snickered and laughed, and then like all the teenagers looked really uncomfortable. And it was just like, whoa,
I felt like
I hit a nerve.
Mormon culture, Utah County has always had this like really steady male vocal quartet type barbershop, like hailing from like barbershop quartet
Yeah.
on like this vocal music. And there's been all of these groups that have blown up out of that.
They love their acapella, man.
Yeah, and
they do.
and being like a Utah native, I don't know which of these are even real groups outside of this bubble that we live in.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is like, I do attribute a certain amount of the incredible musicianship that exists here in Utah amongst the local bands to like people having Mormon upbringings.
Yeah.
You know, people having to take piano lessons earlier in life or do a lot more singing earlier in life. It does seem to sort of inform that musical sensibility. And I think that even for people that didn't grow up LDS, because it's such a strong cultural thing here, is sort of unavoidable to like leach into your life
For sure.
and have it be something that influences you.
It's kind of our breakfast Diet Coke with a little coffee creamer.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I grew up way Mormon, but like, and going to so many shows, like I know I've heard several bands that are like, man, you guys actually sing along. Like this crowd is like, we love it because you guys are singing along, but like we all grew up singing together. So of course it's going to be a natural thing. When we all get together and we all love the same music, we're going to fucking belt it out.
I can't remember who it was, but I went to a show at Burt's in probably like 2006 or 2007. And there was some metal band that did a metal version of High to Kolob.
What?
That ripped. It ripped. It was awesome. And like that's another thing that you see here is that like it's as though there's like an extra component of counterculture in this state because of people that are like rebelling against their youth.
Yep.
So
This isn't the song that I was going to play.
I don't know what this is.
It's the theme song to the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives.
Oh, okay.
Me and like 2% of our listeners are pumped right now.
Well, thanks for being here, fellas.
Yeah, thanks for
It
having
was
me.
a fun chat.
Without further ado, here's the Longest Johns.
I like them.
Go buy yourself some Folk Hogan merch.
I will say, I just got to say real quick.
Yeah.
Longest Johns, just as wonderful and polite as I
What
expected
a
to be,
fucking band.
and
They rip.
remarkably talented,
So good. That was
exceptional.
It started out as a weird crowd, and we did what we do.
Yeah,
Put us in front of people, and we will win them over,
yeah,
and they will all become alcoholics.
little by little. Well, thanks for listening in. By the way, if you want to look super, super cool, head over to the Folk Hogan website. Check out our store, and you can see the cool punk rock vests. And when you check out, put in the code VESTPUNK, and you can get yourself a special deal.
Yeah.
We love you.
Find promise of peace and the solace of rest. As the souls of the dead fill the space of my ears, their laughter like children, their beckoning cheers. My heart longs to join them, sing songs of the sea. I remember the fallen, do they think of me? When their bones in the ocean forever will be. When at last before my ghostly shipmates I stand, I shed a small tear for my home upon land. Though their eyes speak of deaths filled with struggle and strife, their smiles below say I don't owe them my life. As the souls of the dead fill the space of my eyes, and my boat listed over and tried to capsize, I'm this far from drowning, this far from the sea. I remember the living, do they think of me? When my bones in the ocean forever will be.